On November 24th, 2016, the board game Kingdom Death Monster 1.5 launched on Kickstarter. Within 19 minutes, the campaign surpassed $1 million, and by the time it ended, it had raised almost $12.4 million, which even to this day is the fourth largest Kickstarter campaign of all time, and the single largest tabletop game product ever launched on Kickstarter. And here we are almost 7 years later, and the big promise of that campaign, the Gambler's Chest, has finally been delivered. So let's crack open the box, paint the coolest mini inside, and determine if this product was worth 7 years of wait. If you're not familiar with the weird world that is Kingdom Death Monster, how do I best describe it? It's a survival-style, campaign, cooperative, miniatures board game with an aesthetic that combines body horror and anime themes. Basically, dicks and boobs. I'm not going to show any of those today, but yeah, there's a lot of them. Now, the KDM fan base is a thirsty crew in more ways than one, now that I think about it. And they've been waiting on pins and needles for almost 7 years for the contents of these two boxes. So let's see if all those delays are worth the wait. And one big draw to the Gambler's Chest is that everything in here is an entire new expansion that you can add to the core game. And it's got all the great things that you expect from a big expansion game. It's got a nice, big, fancy, thick hardcover rulebook. It's got more cards than you can shake a stick at. And look how many different sizes these cards are. Seriously, there's like 12 different sizes for all the cards in this game. Character sheets, settlement sheets, more cards, more cards, more cards, more cards. If you've gotten into the miniatures board game craze over the last number of years, none of the sheer number of cards and dice in here will be a surprise to you. But what really excites me is not what's in this box. I do love the game, but this one, filled with that beautiful, beautiful plastic crack, that's what we're after. This box contains bag after bag after bag after bag of plastic sprues, and you'll notice there's no box art for anything in here. There's no build instructions for any of these models. Luckily, Kingdom Death Monster has created a wonderful step-by-step instructional page showing you what each model is going to look like when it's done and how to build it. Also, a nice little bonus, printed on each sprue is the name of the model, so you know which one you're getting when you're trying to find a certain model in the pile. I've taken all the sprues out of that box so you can see in one place how massive this pile really is, all except for one model. You see, one model I already have back on my workstation and I'm beginning to assemble to paint for today's video. To me, what really makes Kingdom Death Monster unique and important to the hobby that we love is these high quality plastic kits. Not only are the sculpts incredibly unique, dynamic, and detailed, but the final models themselves are almost as crisp and clean as those by Games Workshop. So whether or not you're a fan of the Kingdom Death game or the aesthetic of their models, it's something really important here. This is a small, niche company that is building really high quality plastic models, and they have a business model that can sustain that. To me, it gives hope that we live in a world where we're not beholden only to Games Workshop for the highest quality plastic models on the market. But it's not all perfect. The kits have what seems like way too many pieces than it feels like they should to be put together. And many sections are 2 parts, and it feels like they should have only been 1. Also, and this is especially true for our bigger monster models, the kits don't fit together perfectly. It's like the manufacturing process that they use and the engineering they did to slice the models isn't as great as it could be. It doesn't seem perfectly precise like we're used to with Games Workshop. But I found the best way to put these models together with all their imperfections in assembly is to use sprue goo quite liberally in between each part that you're going to put together. Then, as that sprue goo spreads out the side, you can take pure plastic cement and smooth that area over to create a nice, seamless transition. And then, when everything is cured, you can come back in with a file or a bit of sandpaper and smooth over those edges to look like there was never a seam to begin with. Oh, in an old video, I do talk about how to make your very own sprue goo and how I prefer to use it. I'll put a link up in the corner of the screen there so you can check it out if you want to do some yourself. This monster is called the Crimson Crocodile, a new boss in the Kingdom Death Monster universe, and it will tear apart, devour, and poop out all of your survivors, so you better come ready to die. It's pure nightmare fuel. So how do we approach painting nightmare fuel? Well, the obvious answer is to just paint it like a horror movie jump scare, mostly dark with the head painted really bright like it's popping out of the darkness at you. But that's way too obvious, and the last thing I want to do today is the obvious. What if we do the exact opposite? What if we paint this thing like a chromatic menagerie, as if it's reflecting every color of the spectrum based on the angle you're looking at it from? Is it possible? Can we make this thing extremely colorful and still creepy as hell? Yeah, I don't know either, but I guess we're gonna find out. I'm starting by airbrushing brighter and warmer colors coming from the top and right side of the model. And then we're gonna move down to cooler colors as we go further down the model and to its left side. By having a brighter, cool color in this jade coming from below and to the left, we're adding more depth to this hot dog shape of a model. And while this gives us the impression that the surface of the beast is reflective, it's also giving us a nice cool bounce light coming from below. And don't feel like you have to figure out this entire color scheme before you ever start painting. I sure didn't know what I was gonna do. I just kept grabbing colors where I felt I needed more depth, where I felt I needed a brighter color, where I needed to boost in the shadows more. As long as you keep moving, it's gonna turn out probably okay. And if you're asking, do I need an airbrush to do a paint job like this? No, you don't. You can work with wet paint and a big brush and kind of slop it all over and meld the colors where they meet. And then after you've gotten your base colors down, you can come back through with really thin glazed paints to add all the color depth that we're gaining by painting one color over the other with an airbrush. But if I'm being honest, that process is going to take a lot more time and actually takes more skill than just putting a little bit of paint in any airbrush you have or a cheap one you can get on Amazon and just throwing down some colors. Once our base colors have been established, we're done with the airbrush for today, and we're going to bring out our brush and start working up the highlights of this beast and try to pump up how creepy we can make it look. And for this, I use a pretty simple formula. I take a little bit of the paint that is the base color that's already on the model, and I mix into that warm, bright colors till I get a nice, vibrant, warmer tone. Skin tones, yellows, oranges, pinks, these are all great colors to create more interesting highlight tones, and I always want to use those over pure white. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, there was nothing better than waking up early on a Saturday morning, pouring myself a giant bowl of sugar-laden cereal and planting myself in front of that TV for Saturday morning cartoons. But as we become adults, we realize there's not a lot of things worse for you than eating sugar-laden cereal. All they have is simple carbs and that sugar. And I found they're one of the best foods at making me fat and screwing with my diabetes. But to satisfy those sugary, nostalgic cravings, I've turned to Magic Spoon. And I really need you all to know how awesome this stuff is. I've been enjoying it on a regular basis for almost 2 years now. I've lost about 15 pounds, and it's because of the 0 sugars, 4 net carbs, and over 13 grams of protein in each serving. Plus, with that protein, I'm full until my next meal. If you want to try one of the few healthy foods I've ever had that actually tastes good, check out the link below and try out Magic Spoon today. And if you use code NINJON at checkout, you get $5 off your order. From here, it's just as simple as using my brush to touch the edges and raise surfaces on the model to really accentuate and create more volumes across the body. And sometimes it's fun to draw little extra lines to show the texture of the surface as well. And this is a really fun and relaxing approach to highlighting because you don't need to think about being too exact for any given brush stroke. You're just putting them down where the model is telling you it needs a highlight. As I move around the model to paint different colored surfaces, I mix new puddles with some of the base color for each new area. And this doesn't need to be perfect because we have so much color overlap and blending in our base colors that we can be a little bit free and loose as to where we place which highlight we've mixed on which different color area. Based on the way that I did the base coats with the airbrush, I bet you can already tell where I'm going to focus my energy on the highlights for this model. He has this wonderful curve to his back on his right side. It's almost like an arrow that's pointing right to the face. So with that curve and with that face, that's where we'll spend most of our time doing the highlights. I know sometimes it's kind of hard to tell in a video, but this model is huge for a miniature. But because we use the airbrush to create a lot of initial colors and interesting areas and shadows, we don't need to spend a lifetime highlighting everything. And I've found that this has really come to be my favorite way to paint big models. Let the large, complex colors from the base coats do their work, and then just define the model's crisp edges and spend time painting just the fun parts of the model. It's interesting how quickly all the other areas of the model just melt into a cohesive piece when you have control over where the audience is looking. And there are a couple of tricks I've learned over the years that really makes painting in this style look its best. And the first one is paint consistency. I want my paint thinned down enough so it doesn't create a stark, fully opaque coat with one brushstroke. I want a bit of that base color underneath still showing through. Different paint brands, different paint colors, different pigments that are in different paints, they all have different opacities. And when you mix a few of these together, you can't easily know how opaque or transparent it's going to end up looking unless you test it. The way I choose to test the paint opacity is to use the back of my hand. I just take the color once I have it thoroughly mixed and I put a line down my hand like that. If I can see a bit of my skin color underneath or showing through that brush stroke, that means I've done it right. If the color is so opaque I can't see my own skin tone underneath, that means I need to add a little bit of water to the paint to thin it down until I can see a bit of my skin. If I do this test and I can see my skin very clearly and it's almost like just a tint of that color has been placed over my skin, then I need to mix in more paint because it's become too thin and I need to build up that opacity more. The next tip is working with lines. Because our paint is now the correct consistency, we get to add contrast to the model by creating lines to build up our highlights. The base colors we've created with the airbrush all across the model are super smooth, with gentle transitions from one color to another. If we highlighted this model in that same way with nice, smooth, silky transitions from one color of the highlight down to the base color, it would be flat, it would be boring. There wouldn't be any inconsistencies in texture across the model. And by using these lines and texture, we're creating punch and pop to our model. So if my goal is to create a horrifying model, I need to maximize use of punch and pop and interest. So regardless of the colors we choose, we're amplifying the creepiness of the sculpt to make the model look almost uneasy to look at. And if we have any hope of pulling that off, we're going to focus on a couple of really important areas to make sure we can sell these the most, that this thing is horrifying. Sometimes I'll just use color to create a tension, a feeling of unease, like adding a nasty crimson to the areas where the fingers are clawing their way out of the monster's neck, and using that same red around the eyes of the beast. The tongue is another great place to spend some time. It's so wonderfully designed with movement and nastiness. I really want to make sure that that tongue doesn't fade away into the rest of the face. You can also pull attention away from certain areas with paint. I like to use dark, interesting colors in thinned down glazes to add variety and depth around the areas that I really want to pop. It kind of works the same way as eyeshadow does on the eyes of a human. It accentuates the eyes because of the darkness we've put around them. So yeah, start using eyeshadow on your models. Not real eyeshadow, although. But the detail I really want to take my time on and push hard on are the eyes. Then this thing's got like a dozen of them. You know, why wouldn't it? If we don't make these things stick out like a boner in sweatpants, we aren't gonna succeed at making this thing as creepy as we possibly could. I find this red-gray color is perfect for the whites of the eyes. It's got a little bit of warmth in it, it's not too bright, and also it's my color from my signature set, so of course I would think it's an awesome color. For the iris itself, notice that I'm not repainting the entire thing. I'm using that interesting purple to red fade as a starting point, and then I'm just using the brightest possible red I own to edge highlight it and create a few select lines to really boost that iris. By doing it this way, the base color of these irises feel cohesive with the rest of the colors in this section of the model. But because we've gone so vibrant and over the top with that red highlight, they stand out as something we cannot possibly look away from. The last and most important step of the eyes is to use a heavy body white to create that bold, bright shine of pure white in the top left corner of each eye. The key to this white dot is that you actually place it where it's overlapping the iris and the whites of the eye. This indicates that the shine is coming from the total spherical shape of the eye, not just the colorful iris. The final few things I crank out are the teeth, which are just a single highlight of bone, again creating a lot of thin lines to define the edges and the shapes. And then I come back through with a thinned orangish yellow shade paint to boost the color depth and vibrancy on a few areas that seemed like they were a little lacking when looking at the piece as a whole. And with one final glance around the entire model to check for anything else I missed, I'm happy, so I think I'm ready to call it done. And while painting a single model from this long-awaited game is not a proper indicator to determine whether it was worth the 7-year wait or not, I must say that this was so much fun, and it really gets me excited to get back to playing Kingdom Death, which I also kind of love. But you, the jury, still need to render your verdict. Did we do it? Did we create a paint job that is both colorful and horrifying? Is it a clown fiesta, or will it be staring deep into your soul every time you close your eyes to sleep at night? Let me know down in the comments below what your opinion is. And while you're down there, let me know if you've ever played Kingdom Death Monster before, and if you like it as much as I do when a boss monster rips one of your hero's limbs off and he uses those limbs to beat to death all the other people in your party, and then you gotta make your way back to camp with no people left alive and hope that the people back at camp were really busy making babies so your civilization doesn't snuff out like a candle in the darkness. It's a low-stress game, really. So many people die. So many. And while we're on the topic of things we love, can I say that I love my patrons? It's because of you that I get to have fun ideas like paint this weird monster for Kingdom Death and still get your support to make these videos happen. And I don't feel like I have to do every single one of my videos painting Warhammer. Since we're in the touchy-feely mood, I want to thank every one of you that used the links down in the video description to buy your hobby goodies, your paints, your models, all your supplies. Seriously, if you live in North America, you're going to want to check out the link down below with my new partner, Michigan Toy Soldier. With my code and their already discounted prices, it's the cheapest you can get anything out there for our hobby. And the best part about it is they carry literally everything. Even the most niche hobby products, they seem to have them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go play a game and let this thing murder all my family. But I'm going to be back here again with another video before you know it. No, that one's not going to have dicks and boobs in it either. But sometime between now and then, make sure you find time in your day to slay the gray. On November 24th, 2000... Oh, forgot that fucking thing. Indicates that the shine is coming from the total globular. Why do I do this with my hands when I say globular?